is Trump the chicken or the egg, right? Like that's part of the question. But what we do know is that
he's definitely the chicken and the egg.
He's both.
He's definitely both. I mean, this is all people were just the things that came out of his mouth, how he announced his presidency calling Mexicans rapists. It was like he just opened the shutters to like insane xenophobia.
3, 2, 1. Here we go.
As an AAPI person, it does give me pause. If I was walking around outside, I would have my earbuds on, I'd be listening to books on tape. I would never do that now because of the incidents of totally unprovoked hate crimes against AAPI.
Kind of striking to hear from a sitting senator, right? That like, she doesn't feel safe walking around. And I think this kind of, and we've written about this in Playbook, about how members of the AAPI community have been telling us for months that this stuff was happening and to pay attention. The shooting in Georgia was kind of like when people started paying attention, unfortunately, including a lot of us in the mainstream media.
I just think a lot of it is like a conflation between like all this anti-China rhetoric that politicians on both sides of the aisle have, been spouting for a long time, frankly. Geopolitical issues sometimes are spun into national political issues. The truth is that what China did on COVID was wrong. They did not alert the WHO. They were, it's a communist country, and there is place for anger against China for how they handled COVID. And I think that has been spun into hate against Asian people who had nothing to do with that.
The people who work in this space, the researchers, the advocates that I've talked to, they say the language on the left about the country China and our policies with China versus what we've seen on the right, and especially with Trump over the last year, the China virus, all those kinds of things. And that is the stuff that makes it bad, not just general talk about China policy. It's the way you talk about China policy. And
it's like, let's choose a scapegoat. And it's easy in politics to do that. And it's something that like responsible politicians and their consultants, et cetera, need to be aware of.
Well, what I'm concentrating on is the future. And what we are confronted with here is a totally left-wing administration with a slight majority in the House, a 50-50 Senate, trying to transform America into something no one voted for last year. No one voted to transform America into something totally different. 50-50 Senate, couple of seat majority in the House. They want to try to fundamentally change America into something it's never been.
That's not true at all. A lot of people voted to transform America. That's how elections work. I don't know what that means.
Well, what he's saying, I think, and I kind of agree, is that like they don't have the majority. They don't have the overwhelming majority.
But they do have a majority. If you can get a tie-breaking vote in the Senate, you have the majority. That's how he would operate.
Then why are we talking about the filibuster every day? They don't have those extra votes, and they're not willing to work with Republicans on it. It's just that, like, I get what he's saying. Like, the country didn't overwhelmingly choose a Democratic House, a Democratic Senate, and a Democratic president.
That is not the benchmark for like governing. Is like overwhelming support, right? Like that's right. like Trump lost the popular vote.
No, but he had a Republican House and Senate at the time too.
And you have a Democratic House and Democratic Senate now.
Yeah, but only by a few votes. I mean,
but
only by a
few have it. A win is a win is a win, no?
Not really in politics, because that's the case.
I feel like especially in politics.
No, it's not, because you can't pass with 60. If you have to pass something with 60 votes, that means then you have to choose a more moderate choice.
But they don't have to pass with 60 votes. They have reconciliation for the last bill. They can do reconciliation with.
Okay, but then what about everything else? Then why do we even talk about the filibuster if it's not an issue? They like barely won the House and the Senate, and they're probably going to lose the House in the fall. I mean, in 2022.
That's definitely true.
I would not run if President Trump ran.
Sorry, I rolled my.
And I would talk to him about it. That's something that we'll have a conversation about at some point if that decision is something that has to be made.
Yeah, you won't run because you would lose, I think.
Exactly. The thing about these 2024 possibles is that for years, the Republican Party has made any kind of person who was outspoken against Trump like persona non grata. You cannot say anything bad about Trump. So how the hell could you run against him? You like anybody that disagreed with the man for 4 years, you guys like wrote off out of the party. So there's no damn way you could run for president against him. There's just no way. None of them.
He's just so popular with Republicans.
Right.
Like way more popular than she is with Republicans.
Or any of them. Pence,
Really?
Hawley, Cruz, Rubio.
And there's something about like Trump, like no matter what digs someone throws at him, it just doesn't stick. And they're all scared. They are like scared little kittens, afraid of Trump and what he might say. Even if he doesn't run, he's going to make it hell for her. And just to think that like all she did was condemn an insanely horrible situation, like January 6th, like horrific. People died, you know? She did the obvious and now she's politically going to pay for it. And it's like, at some point, like, do you just sit it out? Like someone like her?
Or do you stand up and say, I stood up for what was right when it mattered, even if you know you're going to get destroyed, to have like a conversation about January 6th?
Well, maybe we make her the Joan of Arc, maybe. I don't know. I just think she would get annihilated.
I want to make it clear again, there is absolutely no justification, none, for looting, no justification for violence. Peaceful protest, understandable. And the fact is that, we do know that the anger, pain, and trauma that exists in the Black community in that environment is real. It's serious and it's consequential. But it will not justify violence and or looting.
So I tweeted about this, not about this moment, but just kind of like in general. Tara, when I was younger, like we've talked about this in general, but like when you're a Black kid, your parents you have the talk, right? They talk to you about how you're supposed to interact with police officers. Mm-hmm. And so the first time that I got stopped by a police officer, I was like driving from our home where we used to live on a military post because my dad was in the Army. And so I got stopped and I was like shaking because it was like the first time, and I'd heard all these stories. I'd seen all this evidence of interactions with police officers and Black men. And so I called my mom, who was just at home. I mean, I was like minutes from home. So I called my mom to like, keep me calm and like to be there in case something happened. Every time that I've been stopped by police, I've always called her.
Like
even
while,
when she lived in
while
Dubai.
they were talking to you, you keep
every time. I would call the second that it happened. And it's tied to like this fear that something's going to happen.
It's terrifying to think that. When I get pulled over, I just think, can I flirt my way out of this?
Right. I've never had that thought.
It's kind of, you're right. It's a totally different view of like law enforcement. Like I look at them as someone, as a form of security, and you have to fear them, which is terrible.
Me and my mom have always been very close. I am a mama's boy.
Right.
And so after George Floyd, she was like calling all the time, still does every day, calling every day. And so the other day I asked her, I said, Mom, are you calling me because you're more nervous? You're like more scared than you have been. And she said, yeah. And so my mom has been calling me daily to make sure that I'm not killed by cops.
I can't say what it's like, and I'm kind of made light of it being like, oh, I just flirt my way out of tickets, but it is like a white girl privilege, essentially.
Yeah. It is something that people in this country do not fully understand what that's like. And until there's some empathy about that, right?
Yeah.
Until people are able to realize their privilege in interactions with the state, it is almost impossible to fix.